They tied the Apache twins to a tree for stealing bread. A lonely rancher freed them and took them in. The morning sun rose slowly over the small frontier town, casting long shadows across the dusty streets. The town itself was quiet at first, the silence only broken by the soft clatter of hooves on wooden boards and the faint calls of early merchants preparing their shops. Life in this town was never easy. Everyone worked hard to survive. The desert wind blew constantly, carrying dust and the scent of dry earth, and the people had learned to be tough, to look after themselves first. In this harsh world, there was little room for mistakes and even less room for mercy. In the narrow alley behind the bakery, two small figures moved cautiously. They were twins, no more than 10 years old, their faces streaked with dust and their clothes tattered from the harsh life they had lived. Their skin, sun-kissed from days spent outside, carried the marks of living on the edge of society, and their eyes, dark and alert, reflected a mixture of fear and determination. These two children, brothers in every way, had survived together for as long as they could remember. They had learned to depend on each other completely, sharing every small joy and every hardship that life had forced upon them. The twins had come to the bakery not out of malice, but out of hunger. The world had given them little, and they had learned that if they wanted to survive, they had to take what they needed. The bakery smelled wonderful, warm bread rising in the ovens, its aroma drifting into the streets and tempting anyone who passed. Breath. The twins' stomachs grumbled painfully as they watched the baker move around, placing loaves in neat rows on the counters. They exchanged a quick glance, communicating silently as they always did, and nodded to each other. Today, they decided they could not wait for someone to help them. They had to act. With small, careful steps, they moved closer to the door, peeking in to make sure no one was watching too closely. The twins were quick and quiet, shadows among shadows, but even their careful planning was not enough to go completely unnoticed. The baker, a stern man who had seen many children in need, was alert to every movement in his shop. Still, he was busy arranging the shelves and did not notice the tiny figures slipping inside. The twins grabbed a loaf each, feeling the warmth of the bread in their small hands, and turned to leave. Their hearts pounded with a mixture of fear and excitement. They knew what they had done was wrong, but they also knew they were hungry, and hunger often made rules seem less important. As they slipped out into the alley, the baker spotted them. His voice rose sharply, startling the twins and making them drop one loaf. "Hey! Stop right there!" he shouted, running after them. Panic surged through the children. They ran as fast as their small legs could carry them, weaving through the narrow streets, hearts racing, hoping against hope that someone would not catch them. But the townspeople had already begun to notice the commotion. Curious eyes peered from windows, and a few people came out, murmuring and shaking their heads. In this town, theft was taken seriously, and even small children were not exempt from punishment. The twins ran toward the edge of town, but it was too late. A group of townspeople carrying ropes and scowling faces had cornered them near a large oak tree that stood in the center of the square. The twins froze, realizing that escape was impossible. The ropes were pulled from rough hands, and before they could react, they were tied to the tree, their small bodies pressed against the rough bark. The ropes dug into their wrists, leaving red marks on their tender skin. But the pain was nothing compared to the fear that gripped their hearts. Their lives were intertwined now, two young souls learning to live with guidance and care. And one man discovering that connection could heal the emptiness of years spent in solitude. And so, the ranch became a place of refuge, a place where fear no longer ruled, and where two young twins could slowly grow, learn, and dream. Life was not perfect, and the world outside remained harsh, but within the fence and under the watchful eyes of the rancher, they had discovered the possibility of love, safety, and family. It was here, on this small plot of land, that the twins would begin a new chapter of life, far from the cruelty of the town and the tree where they had once been tied. The next morning the ranch was quiet in the soft light of dawn. Birds called from the trees, and the wind rustled gently through the tall grass. The twins were already awake, their small bodies stretching as they prepared for the day. They had begun to feel safe in their new home, but the memory of the tree and the ropes still lingered in their minds. Even as they learned to trust, the fear from the town and the punishment they had endured would not leave them entirely. The rancher appeared in the doorway, his broad figure outlined by the early sunlight. He carried a small basket of food and a gentle smile. "Good morning," he said quietly, his voice calm and kind. The twins looked at each other, and then back at him. They had learned that he was patient, never angry for mistakes, never shouting and never forcing them to do something they didn't want to do. This morning, however, he had a different purpose. "We're going to the barn," he said. "There's something I want to show you." Curiosity sparked in the twins' eyes, and they followed him out the door. The barn was large, its wooden beams strong and solid. Inside, the smell of hay, animals, and earth filled the air. Horses moved quietly in their stalls, sniffing at the twins as they entered. The rancher knelt to the ground, patting a small horse that had a gentle expression. "This is Clover," he said. "She's very gentle and kind. You can brush her and feed her. Breath. She likes company."
The twins' eyes widened.
They had never been near animals in this way before. The horses were not frightening or dangerous. They were calm, friendly, and surprisingly comforting. One twin reached out slowly, hand trembling as he touched Clover's soft mane. The horse nickered softly, leaning into the touch. "See, she trusts you," the rancher said. "Animals can teach you a lot." Narration. They respond to kindness and patience. You can do the same with people. The twins nodded, absorbing his words, though their minds were still partly focused on the fear they had left behind in town.
The rancher handed them brushes and small buckets of oats.
"Take your time. There's no rush." Hours passed as the twins worked with the animals. They laughed as Clover tried to nibble the brush, and their fears began to melt with each gentle touch and shared smile. The rancher watched quietly, proud of their careful movements. He had never had children around before, and though he had lived alone for many years, he found a strange joy in their presence. Their laughter was like a song in the stillness of the ranch, filling spaces that had been quiet and lonely for far too long. After feeding and grooming the horses, the rancher took the twins to the vegetable garden. The sun was high now, and the twins marveled at rows of green plants and colorful vegetables growing steadily in the rich soil. "Everything here needs care and attention," the rancher explained. "First, if you neglect it, it will not grow. But if you tend it with patience, it will thrive." The twins bent to the earth, digging small holes for seeds and watering the plants. For the first time, they realized that effort and care could produce results, that their hands, once only used for survival, could also create life and beauty. As the sun began to descend toward the horizon, the twins grew tired, their small bodies aching from the day's work. The rancher led them back to the house, where a warm meal awaited. The twins sat side by side at the table, eating slowly, savoring every bite. The rancher watched them quietly, noticing the way they shared food and encouraged each other. Even in small actions, he saw the bond between them, unbreakable and full of care. After dinner, they sat around the fireplace. The twins were beginning to feel the weight of exhaustion, but their curiosity and desire to understand the world around them kept them alert. The rancher, noticing their restlessness, began to speak. "Do you want to hear a story?" he asked. They nodded eagerly. He spoke of his life in the open land, of the lessons he had learned from the animals, the land, and the long, lonely nights. Desk. He did not talk about riches or grand adventures, but about simple truths, honesty, patience, and the power of kindness. The twins listened, captivated. They realized that this man who had rescued them from the harshness of the town had wisdom that went beyond fear or punishment. He had learned to survive alone, but had also learned the value of compassion. They felt themselves slowly learning the same lessons. That night they asked questions, small, careful questions, about life, the land, and even the past. The rancher answered gently, never rushing them, never scolding them for curiosity. For the first time in their lives, their questions were welcomed, not met with anger. Sleep came slowly, but it came. The twins lay in the small bed side by side, whispering quietly. They talked about the tree, the ropes, and the harsh eyes of the townspeople. But they also talked about the horses, the garden, and the warmth of the fire. In that quiet moment, they understood that their lives had changed. They were no longer simply trying to survive. They were beginning to live. The next morning, the rancher introduced another lesson. He led the twins to the nearby creek, a sparkling ribbon of water winding through the land. Water is life, he said. It gives the animals strength, helps the plants grow, and even teaches patience. Watch it flow. The twins knelt at the edge of the creek, dipping their hands in, letting the cool water flow over their fingers. Breath. They laughed as the water splashed, and in that simple act, they felt freedom. Freedom not just from fear, but from the constant worry of what the world might do to them next. As weeks passed, the twins' confidence grew. They learned to ride the horses, to care for the animals without fear, and to work the land with patience. Their bodies grew stronger, but more importantly, their hearts grew too. They began to understand what trust felt like, what it meant to rely on someone without fear. They started calling the rancher father, though the word felt new and heavy with emotion. The rancher, in turn, began to care for them in ways he had never thought possible. He learned to laugh with them, to guide them, and to protect them. One day, as the sun set in brilliant orange and pink hues, the rancher took the twins to the top of a small hill overlooking the ranch. "Look at what you've done," he said. The twins followed his gaze. They saw the garden they had tended, the animals they had helped care for, and the wide open land stretching far beyond. It was a world of their own, a world where they could breathe, laugh, and dream. Bet. For the first time, they understood the magnitude of the change that had come into their lives. They had gone from being tied to a tree, punished for survival, to standing in a place where kindness and care shaped their days. Evenings were filled with small routines that taught lessons beyond words. The rancher showed them how to mend tools, care for fences, and understand the weather. Each task was small, but each carried a lesson. The twins learned patience, diligence, and the quiet pride of work done well. They also learned to care for each other in new ways, not just for survival, but out of love and shared responsibility. In every moment, whether feeding the animals or tending the garden, they felt the presence of safety and trust that had been absent for so long. Sometimes the twins would speak of the town, their voices small and hesitant. They shared memories of the town square, the ropes, and the shame they had felt. The rancher listened quietly, never dismissing their fear, never rushing them to forget. "What happened there will not define you," he said softly. "You are more than fear. You are brave, and you are kind, and you are safe here." In those words, the twins began to heal, piece by piece. They understood that the cruelty of others did not have to shape their future. They had a new life, and it was theirs to build. One rainy afternoon, as the twins sat by the fireplace watching the drops fall against the window, The rancher spoke of dreams. Life is not only about surviving. It is about living. You can dream, you can hope, and you can create a life you want. The twins listened, imagining things they had never dared to imagine before. A life without fear, a life full of warmth, laughter, and love. They began to plan small goals, learning to ride better, helping the rancher with bigger tasks, even planting a new section of the garden. Their minds, once consumed with hunger and fear, now held space for hope. By the end of the month, the twins had become part of the ranch in a way that felt natural. They were no longer the frightened children who had been tied to a tree. They were helpers, learners, and companions. The rancher, who had lived alone for years, had found family. Together, they shared meals, chores, laughter, and stories. Each day was simple, yet full of meaning. And for the first time, all three of them understood that family is not always born. Sometimes it is chosen, nurtured through care, trust, and love. The twins had learned that courage was not just running from danger, but facing it together. They had learned that kindness could come from unexpected places, that adults could protect rather than punish, and that the world, though harsh, could also be gentle. And the rancher had learned that even after years of solitude, there was room in his life for love, laughter, and connection. Their lives, intertwined in this quiet corner of the world, had begun a new story, one of trust, hope, and the quiet joy of belonging. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. The ranch, once quiet and still, was now alive with the laughter and energy of the twins. They had grown stronger, braver, and more confident under the watchful care of the rancher. Every corner of the ranch seemed full of new opportunities for learning and adventure. The twins woke each morning to the smell of fresh bread and the sounds of animals beginning their day. Their routines were simple but meaningful, feeding the chickens, brushing the horses, carrying water from the well, and helping with small repairs. Each task taught them responsibility, patience, and the quiet pride of contributing to something bigger than themselves. The rancher watched them closely, his heart swelling with a sense of purpose he had not felt in years. He had spent so long alone, thinking life had little more to offer than survival. But the twins had brought a new light into his days. Their curiosity reminded him of what he had once felt as a boy: wonder at the world, excitement for small discoveries, and the joy of learning without fear. He began to teach them not just the work of the land, but the lessons of life itself. "The land teaches patience," he said one afternoon, gesturing to the rows of growing crops. "It doesn't hurry, and neither should you." Sometimes the slowest growth brings the strongest results. The twins listened intently, absorbing every word. They had lived so long with fear and hunger that the idea of patience was almost foreign to them. In the town, everything was rushed, harsh, and unforgiving. Here, however, there was time to learn, to fail, to try again, and to grow. One twin, the quieter of the two, began to understand that making mistakes was no longer something to fear. The rancher's gentle corrections were never scolding, never cruel. They were lessons meant to guide, not punish. Slowly, the twins began to embrace challenges, learning that effort and care could produce results far greater than simple survival. As the seasons changed, the ranch became not just a place of work, but a place of play and exploration. The twins discovered hidden paths through the fields, secret nooks by the creek, and even a small grove of trees where birds nested safely. The rancher often joined them on their small adventures, teaching them to notice the world around them. The way the wind shifted, how the soil smelled after rain, or how animals moved when no one was watching. These small lessons were not just about nature. They were lessons about life, awareness, and understanding. The twins began to feel connected to the land, to the animals, and most importantly, to the man who had saved them. Evenings were the twins' favorite time. After the work of the day was done, the three of them would sit by the fireplace. The rancher telling stories of the past, of simple wisdom, and sometimes of small mistakes he had made long ago. The twins shared their own stories too, speaking of memories from before, dreams for the future, and even fears they had never voiced. The rancher listened patiently, never dismissing their words, and in these moments the twins realized that they were truly heard. They learned that speaking their minds and sharing their thoughts was safe and even welcomed. For children who had spent most of their lives hiding and running, this was a powerful lesson. One afternoon, the rancher decided it was time to teach the twins an important lesson about courage. He led them to a rocky hill on the edge of the ranch. Sometimes, he said, you have to face your fears, not because the world is cruel, but because fear can stop you from seeing what is beautiful and possible. The twins glanced at the steep hill, unsure if they could climb it. Their small hands trembled, and their hearts raced. The rancher smiled reassuringly. "I will be with you every step of the way. You can do this together." Step by step, hand in hand, the twins climbed the hill with the rancher guiding them. Their legs ached and their breaths came in quick gasps, but neither gave up. When they reached the top, the view took their breath away. The ranch stretched far below them, fields, animals, and the little creek shining in the sunlight. Respecting. The twins felt a rush of pride and joy, realizing that they had accomplished something they once thought impossible. The rancher nodded at them, his eyes shining with pride. See what courage can bring? Not just safety, but a new perspective, a chance to grow. Days turned into months, and the bond between the rancher and the twins grew stronger. The twins began to help more actively, not just out of necessity, but out of love for their new home. They learned to care for the animals as if they were family, to tend the garden with patience and diligence, and to help with repairs around the house. In every action, they reflected the lessons they had learned: kindness, responsibility, and courage. And the rancher, in turn, found himself changing. His once quiet, lonely days were now full of laughter, chatter, and the warmth of companionship. The twins also began to show remarkable creativity, but they found ways to make life on the ranch even more enjoyable, building small bird houses, painting simple signs for the animal stalls, and inventing games that taught them more about nature and each other. The rancher encouraged them, marveling at their imagination. He realized that children, when given safety and love, could flourish in ways that no punishment or fear could ever achieve. He saw their laughter as proof that a life rooted in kindness was far stronger than one built on fear. On quiet nights, the twins would lie on the porch, looking at the stars. "Do you think the town remembers us?" one twin asked. The rancher shook his head gently. "It doesn't matter. What matters is who you are now and who you will become. The past does not have to define you." The twins gazed at the sky, feeling the truth in his words. They had been tied to a tree, punished for survival, and yet they had found safety, care, and love. Past. Their past was a memory, but their present and future were theirs to shape. The rancher taught them more than just practical skills. He taught them about kindness, empathy, and understanding. He encouraged them to help each other, to care for animals, and to treat the land with respect. He also showed them that courage was not just about facing danger, but about being honest, standing up for what is right, and helping those in need. These lessons were subtle but powerful, shaping the twins into thoughtful, confident, and compassionate young people.
One afternoon, a small event reminded the twins of how far they had come.
A stray dog wandered onto the ranch looking frightened and hungry. The twins approached it cautiously at first, remembering their own fear and hunger from the town. With gentle hands, they offered it food and spoke softly, echoing the care the rancher had shown them. The dog soon warmed to them, wagging its tail and following them around. The twins laughed, realizing that their actions could bring safety and happiness to another living creature. They had learned to care, to protect, and to create a small world of trust and compassion. As time passed, the rancher began to see the twins not just as children he had rescued, but as part of his family. He had once thought solitude was all life had to offer, but now he understood that connection and love could bring a depth of happiness he had never imagined. The twins, in turn, had found stability, safety, and a home where they could be themselves. Their days were filled with work, learning, and laughter, but also with the quiet moments of reflection that came from feeling secure and loved. One late evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, the rancher sat with the twins by the fire.
"You've both grown so much," he said softly.
Not just in strength, but in courage, kindness, and understanding. Life can be harsh, but it can also be full of joy, love, and hope. Never forget that. The twins listened quietly, their eyes shining with gratitude. They understood now that the ranch was more than a home. It was a place of transformation, a place where they could heal, learn, and dream.
In the months and years that followed, the twins became inseparable from the ranch and its work.
They helped the rancher with every task, learning skills that would serve them for life. They learned to ride, care for the animals, and understand the land, but most importantly, they learned the meaning of family, trust, and love. The rancher had rescued them from fear and punishment, but together they had built something far greater, a life of hope, courage, and joy. The twins would never forget the tree in the town square, the fear and the hunger. But they also would never forget the kindness of the man who freed them, taught them, and became their family. Their lives had been transformed, not by punishment or force, but by love, care, and guidance. And in the quiet moments on the ranch, as they watched the sun set over the fields and animals, they knew that they were finally home, safe and valued, with a future full of possibilities. They huddled close together, their bodies trembling, finding comfort in each other's presence. The town watched silently as the twins struggled and whispered to each other, small voices trembling. But some of the townspeople looked angry, their faces hard with the belief that punishment was the only way to teach children the rules of the world. Others, mostly women and a few older men, looked away, their eyes softening with sympathy, but no one dared step forward. In this place, fear of social judgment and a belief in harsh justice kept even kind-hearted people silent. The twins' small hands gripped each other tightly, their eyes searching for any sign of mercy, any hope that someone might intervene. Hours passed. The sun climbed higher in the sky, turning the dusty square into a bright, glaring place. The twins' stomachs ached, their throats dry, but they said nothing, trying to appear brave even as their bodies shook. They whispered to each other quietly, sharing memories and stories from the past to keep their minds off the pain and fear. They spoke of the small joys they had known, the games they had played, the sunsets they had watched together, holding on to these memories as a shield against the harsh reality of their punishment. Despite the fear that filled the square, the twins did not give up hope. Deep down they believed that someone kind might come, someone who would see them not as thieves but as children in need. They clung to each other, whispering, encouraging each other to stay strong. The older townspeople had told many stories of strangers showing unexpected kindness, and the twins, though young, believed in the possibility. It was this belief, fragile but persistent, that kept them from despair. As the afternoon wore on, a lone figure appeared on the outskirts of town. He was a man who had long lived alone, a rancher who knew little of the town's rules or its people. He moved slowly but deliberately, riding a worn horse that matched his weathered appearance. His eyes, calm and observant, scanned the square, and when they fell upon the twins, tied and trembling, something inside him shifted. He felt a mixture of anger at the cruelty of the punishment and compassion for the small children who had done nothing truly harmful except survive. He stopped his horse a few feet away, dismounting and walking toward the twins with careful steps, making sure not to startle them further. The twins looked up as the man approached. At first, their eyes were filled with fear, unsure whether the stranger would harm them as well. But the gentle expression on his face, the slow, careful way he moved, reassured them. He spoke softly, not with the sharpness of the townspeople, but with calm words that made them pause. "It's all right," he said, his voice low but kind. "I'm here to help." The twins clung to each other uncertain, but something in the man's demeanor made them trust him, if only a little. He knelt in front of them, examining the ropes. His hands were strong, but gentle as he worked to free them. The twins winced as the ropes bit into their skin, but they did not cry out, sensing the kindness in the man's touch. One by one, the knots were loosened, and the twins were finally freed. They rubbed their wrists, feeling the marks left behind, and looked at the man with a mixture of gratitude and awe. For the first time that day, they felt hope. The possibility that someone could see them as children who deserved care, not just punishment. The townspeople watched in silence as the man helped the twins to their feet. Some shook their heads, muttering that he was interfering where he should not. But the twins did not care. They clung to each other and to the man's hand, trusting him to lead them to safety. He guided them away from the square, away from the whispers and judgments, toward a life that promised warmth, protection, and perhaps a chance to simply be children again. For the twins, that day would never be forgotten. The fear, the hunger, and the cruelty of the punishment had been real. But so had the kindness of the stranger who chose to act when others would not. In their small hearts, a seed of trust and hope had been planted, a seed that would grow in the days and years to come. And for the rancher, too, that day marked the beginning of a bond that would change his life forever, bringing companionship, joy, and the chance to care for those who needed him most. The story of the twins tied to a tree for stealing bread was not just a tale of punishment. It was a story of survival, courage, and the unexpected kindness that can appear in even the harshest of places. It was the beginning of a journey, one that would carry the twins from fear to safety, from hunger to fullness, and from loneliness to a family they had never known they could have. The rancher walked slowly away from the town square, the twins following close behind. Their small hands barely reached his, but he held them gently, letting them feel safe for the first time that day. The streets of the town were still busy with people going about their daily chores, but none dared to interfere as he led the children through narrow alleys and dusty roads. He had been a loner for years, living on the edge of society, far from the noise and judgment of townspeople. His ranch was not far from the outskirts of the town, but it felt like another world entirely, a place untouched by the rules and harshness of society. The twins looked around nervously as they walked. Every corner, every passerby made them tense, ready to run, ready to hide. But the rancher's calm presence gave them a sense of security they had never known. His voice, quiet and steady, guided them as they walked.
"You're safe now. Come with me."
They had never heard words like that from an adult before. Adults in their lives had been harsh, angry, or indifferent. This man, however, seemed different. He did not yell. He did not threaten. He simply walked with them, showing them that kindness could exist in a world that had often been cruel. The journey from the town to the ranch took them along a narrow trail through dry fields and scattered trees. The twins, exhausted from the morning's fear and running, struggled to keep up. The rancher noticed this and slowed his pace, letting them rest when needed. He spoke little, but when he did, his words carried warmth. "There's a place ahead where you can eat and rest. You won't have to hide anymore." The twins glanced at each other, unsure if such a place could exist. Hunger and fear had taught them that promises often broke, but the rancher's calm, steady eyes made them believe, if only a little. As they approached the ranch, The twins saw a large weathered house surrounded by wide fields and grazing animals. Horses moved slowly across the pasture, and cows wandered lazily, their lowing filling the air. A wooden fence enclosed the property, marking it as a safe space, removed from the noise and judgment of the town. The twins had never seen such freedom before. In the town, space was cramped, rules were strict, and every step was watched. Here, the world seemed wide open and inviting. They could hardly imagine that this place would soon become their home. The rancher led them to the house, opening the door and letting them step inside. Warmth greeted them immediately, the heat from a fireplace, the faint smell of food, and the quiet hum of domestic life. The twins looked around in awe. It was simple, nothing extravagant, but everything they saw spoke of safety and care. There were blankets on the beds, fresh bread on a table, and water in a clean pitcher. The rancher gestured for them to sit. Eat first, then we'll talk. The twins, hesitant at first, sat down together and began to eat. The bread tasted unlike anything they had had before, warm, soft, and filling. They ate slowly, savoring every bite, still unsure if this safety was real.
After they had eaten, the rancher spoke to them quietly.
You must have been very hungry and scared today.
I saw what happened in town. You didn't deserve that.
The twins listened, their eyes wide. No one had ever spoken to them like this, acknowledging their fear, acknowledging their humanity. One of the twins, the older by a few minutes, spoke softly. We didn't mean to steal. We were just so hungry. The rancher nodded. I understand. Hunger can make us do things we would not normally do. It's not right to punish you so harshly.
I will not by the...
That is why I brought you here. The twins looked at each other and then back at him. They were still wary. Trust did not come easily to children who had learned to survive on their own. But there was something about this man, his calmness, his care, the way he did not force them or scold them, that made them feel safe enough to stay. Slowly, hesitancy gave way to curiosity.
What is this place?
One of them asked. The rancher smiled faintly. Psst. This is my home. It's not much, but it is safe. The twins did not know what to say. Oh, for the first time, no one was shouting at them. No one was tying them to a tree. They could breathe freely.
In the days that followed, the twins began to explore the ranch under the watchful eyes of the rancher.
They learned about the animals, how to feed the horses, how to gather eggs from the chickens, and how to carry water from the well. Every task was new and exciting. The rancher guided them patiently, never raising his voice, never showing frustration at their mistakes. The twins were amazed at how different life could be when people treated you with kindness instead of fear. Breaths. Slowly, they began to feel a sense of belonging, something they had never known before. At night, the rancher lit a fire in the main room of the house, and the twins would sit close, listening to his quiet stories. He told them about the land, the animals, and the stars above. He spoke about life with honesty, but also with hope. The twins, in return, shared bits of their own memories, small stories of their parents, their life before the town, and the games they had played together. Patiently. The rancher listened patiently, never judging, and in his presence they learned that speaking about the past did not have to bring pain. It could bring connection. The twins also began to notice that the rancher himself was lonely. He rarely spoke of his own past, but there was a sadness in his eyes, a quiet weight that seemed to linger. They realized that they were not the only ones in need of care. Just as they had been rescued from the harshness of the town, the rancher had opened his heart to them, finding in their presence a purpose he had thought lost. Their small laughter, their curiosity, and their trust became a light in his otherwise quiet and lonely life. As days turned into weeks, the twins grew stronger, both in body and spirit. They learned how to ride small horses, how to help in the fields, and even how to cook simple meals under the rancher's supervision. Their confidence grew with each small success. More importantly, they began to trust in the idea that life could be different, that not all adults were cruel, that not every townsperson would judge them, and that there was a place in the world where they could belong. The town, meanwhile, began to notice their absence. Whispers floated through the streets about the children who had been tied to a tree. Some townspeople were angry that a stranger had interfered, while others wondered if perhaps the children had been unfairly punished. The twins, however, did not return. Their lives had changed. They had found safety, warmth, and care. They had found someone who believed in their potential rather than their mistakes. One quiet evening, the twins sat by the fence, watching the sun sink behind the hills. The rancher stood nearby, mending a tool but keeping an eye on them. One of the twins turned to him, eyes wide. "Do you think we'll ever have to go back to the town?" The rancher paused, looking out at the horizon, and then shook his head gently. "Not if we don't want to. You're safe here."
Breaths. This is your home now.
The twins felt a warmth in their hearts, a feeling they had never experienced before. Freedom.
For the first time, they believed that life could be full of hope, not just survival. That night, as they lay in the small beds the rancher had prepared, the twins whispered to each other. They talked about the tree, the fear, and the hunger they had faced. And then they whispered about the kindness of the man who had rescued them. Their hearts, once heavy with anxiety, now carried a fragile but growing sense of safety and belonging. Branch. Sleep came easier that night, without the fear of punishment looming over them. For the twins and for the rancher, life had begun to change, slowly but surely, in ways they could never have imagined. The rancher watched them sleep, quietly thankful that he had acted that day. He had never imagined that freeing two frightened children would become the start of something so meaningful. In their trust and laughter, he found a joy he had not known for many years.